Hello everyone, and welcome to the Formal Review. Today, we'll be talking about the 2020 film, Tenet. Now sit back, relax, maybe grab a drink, and let's talk about the movie.
What's up everybody, and welcome back to the Formal Review. This is Season 3, Episode 24, and I thank you all for tuning in once again. As I'm sure you noticed, the intro was a little bit different. I wanted to change things up a little bit because this episode marks the return to the movie theater, so I thought I'd start something new. So I got myself some mic, yeah, that's right, Take 4 crew, and decided to change the format up a little bit. These reviews are going to be a little bit more chill, more relaxed. There will be some formality to them, but I wanted to make these reviews just a little bit more chill, relaxed, and honestly feel just like I'm talking to you right across the table. But anyway, here we are again. Theaters are now open, and to start off, I saw Tenet in 4DX. Now, I know there's a pandemic going on, but here's what I do to kind of not allow my life experiences to be altered too much. So I get tested every 2 weeks, because I like to keep up a contact trace in case I do get a positive test. As such, I did get tested on Tuesday, and I did get a negative result back today, Thursday. So even though I did not have a good experience at the theater, I did not get the coronavirus while being there. So I went to a Regal theater in my local area, and they have some plans that say what they're doing to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. They do offer new contactless payment options and some sanitizing methods throughout the theater. They have their employees undergoing daily health screenings, including temperature checks if mandated, and they must wash their hands at minimum every 30 to 60 minutes depending on their role. They all must wear masks, and I will say all their employees were wearing masks, but I can't really comment on the other stuff. So they do allow you to make reservations in advance and also purchase concession items from the app. I didn't really buy the food, but I definitely used the app for the ticket buying. So apparently all registers are supposed to remain closed to maintain social distancing. This really wasn't true. People were still taking orders at the counter. There was not a reduced menu offering like they said there would be. I could get anything that I wanted. The self-service condiment stands were not closed like they're supposed to. Auditoriums are supposed to be reduced to 50%, and they're apparently increasing their fresh air intake by 50 to 100% above normal levels, which is supposed to help circulate fresh air throughout auditoriums. I think this was right, but I can't really speak on the air. So to maintain social distancing in the theater, they leave 2 seats in between groups, and guests are required to wear masks at all times while in the auditoriums. Masks can be removed only while eating and drinking, and employees are going to be monitoring the auditoriums throughout each performance as standard practice. No one came in throughout my screening. And furthermore, guests are required to wear face masks at all time while in the lobby, hallways, and restrooms. And per their terms of admission, any guests that aren't complying with these policies shall be asked to leave. And guests will be welcome to return once they are compliant. See, this is where I had the biggest issue. So I don't really know how they're enforcing this, because I saw multiple times while I was there that this wasn't the case. The first time was when I went to the bathroom. A guy was in there with no mask. I love you, Regal. And see, that's where I have the issue that I saw, not even around his neck. He then proceeded to use the restroom and then not wash his hands. I know that because the water faucet didn't turn on, which is honestly disgusting on a whole nother point. Then, after the movie was over, multiple people came out, multiple theaters without masks, walked around, and then, as they were approaching the ticket inspector, they put on their masks. The only people that I saw who worked for the theater were either the ones working behind the concession stands or the one checking your ticket. I also feel that they didn't really wipe down the theaters after the screenings, as there was garbage left in mine and in the row in front of me. I love you, Regal, and I love everything about your unlimited movie plan, but if you didn't have reservations, I would definitely not go back. This was a real poor management of your COVID policies. To anyone out there, if your Regal theater doesn't require reservations, maybe reconsider going. Or go at a time that isn't such high demand, like a weekday night or during the day. At this point, I would not suggest going over the weekend at all. This was absolutely terrible for me. But now that I got the stressful stuff out of the way, let's relax, grab your drinks, and let's get back to the movie at hand. Tenet is an epic science fiction spy action film written and directed by Christopher Nolan. It stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Dimple Kapadia, sorry if I mispronounced that, Michael Caine, Kenneth Branagh, Clemens Posey, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Himesh Patel. So I'm going to give a really quick spoiler-free review because it's really difficult to me to determine what is spoiler and what isn't. So the film starts off with the protagonist, played by Washington, being entrusted on a secret mission to prevent World War III. Posey's character explains that the threat involves inversion, which is technology technology from the future that makes objects move backward in time. Essentially saying that cause comes before effect. And if that's confusing, Posey says to the audience, don't try to understand it. Then later, Neil, played by Patterson, asks the protagonist, does your head hurt yet? And honestly, your head is going to hurt. Not much more to it, but even so, I liked it. So this was my review that I shared with backseat directors. Again, this will be spoiler free. So Nolan uses multiple scientific, the Rotas palindromic square in a very ambitious and ingenious way. He's able to take those ideas and stage them via action sequences that run backward and forward through time simultaneously. Cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema gives some amazing scenes that really make a Bond film look extremely low-key. Ludwig Göransson's score is very Hans Zimmer-like, and it is a thunderstorm. The film has Nolan really trying to outdo the espionage film genre, making his own, filled with speedboats, glamorous locations, and a lot of crisp suits. Each actor does a good job at playing their roles, with Washington and Branagh being the standouts. The former is able to be like his father in more ways than one, while establishing himself as a lead man. The latter really is no surprise, as he is a Shakespearean actor and can really do any role. The film does have some issues with dialogue being muffled, and it feels too short for the complexities that it tackles. This can make the film feel confusing, and maybe subtitles would have been beneficial. The character development and Nolan's treatment of his women characters could be better. For better or worse though, this movie has Nolan really trying to outdo himself, and each viewer will decide if he is successful. In short though, it is in the top tier of Nolan films. Go see it in a theater with the best audio possible. 4DX was pretty much garbage, as nothing really happened. It was pretty much a Dolby Cinema experience, which was fine, but I didn't pay for that. I paid for the seats to move, smoke to come out, maybe to feel a bullet or two, I don't know. Luckily, they did give me a refund, so I saw Tenet for free, so really can't complain about that. But if you have Dolby Cinema, I would definitely suggest that over this. IMAX is probably necessary because you should see it on the biggest screen possible, but make sure you're seeing it in IMAX and not LIMAX. So that's pretty much it for my spoiler-free review. So the next little bit is going to be an analysis of the film, which is going to be extremely spoiler-heavy. I suggest that you go watch the film and come back and listen when you have the time. Okay, sorry for the bad time joke. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is first talk about the plot, and then the concept of time inversion, the ideas of time travel, and then kind of the idea that I think Nolan is putting in his film. Voting isn't just going to the polls anymore on election day. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote is a tool created by Democracy Works, and it breaks down the options your state offers by forecasting a ballot, empowering you to decide where and when to vote. Democracy works best when we all vote, but misinformation and confusion about election procedures have resulted in low voter turnout. How to Vote takes the guesswork out of the voting process. It is easy to use and helps folks from all over the country overcome many of the process barriers to voting. It is committed to helping you vote no matter what. You can use the How-to-Vote tool to sign up for election reminders, see what's on your ballot, get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot, explore your options for returning your mail-in ballot, check your voter registration status, and find your local polling site, and make sure that you have an appropriate ID to bring with you. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote. The characters in this movie are on predestined journeys to make sure the plot plays out as it does for the better or worse. It is essentially a closed loop. The technology that allows them to do this is a futuristic Oppenheimer device, named for the infamous atomic bomb designer. So it's essentially world-ending technology through radiation. So in physics there exist tachyon particles which can theoretically move faster than the speed of light. But because they are outside of the law of physics, these particles can move forward and backward through time. In the film, the scientist from the future develops a way to invert an object's entropy, which for those who haven't taken physics in a long time is a measurement of a molecular control or randomness. To invert this means to take control and stop the random nature of these particles. This then allows people to move forward and backward in time. However, since the future relies on the past cannot be changed in a way that will change the future, and they must move forward to cause the future. So essentially their past must become their present while also being their future.
Try and keep up.
So time inversion is essentially this redistribution of atomic energy levels that takes place in a system so laser action can occur. In physics, there are systems of atoms which maintain an equilibrium with more atoms in lower energy states than in high ones. However, if energy is added to that system, the population of atoms in the higher energy state will become greater than those in the lower energy state. So when you apply that to the movie, time is that system, and the entropy is the measure of energy within that system, and that is is generally not available to be used or controlled. However, as shown in the film, if that energy is inverted, then it can be manipulated, at least in theory. This idea is drawn from the concept of thermodynamics, which, for those who haven't taken chemistry in a really long time, is the relation between heat and other forms of energy. So this film essentially looks at time as a function. And this function has inputs and variables which can send the timeline to places that are either advantageous or disadvantageous to the characters. As such, a person moving through time, either forward or backward, could give different inputs. It makes our hero's journey to prevent the set of events that could lead to the World War III. There are obviously some missteps and apparent altered events, and a potentially ripple effect to messing with time. This essentially touches on the grandfather paradox that basically looks at if you were to travel back in time, kill your grandfather before he had one of your parents, how would you even exist to perform that action? Would you fade away after you killed your grandfather? I mean, if you kill him, you're probably not going to exist. Tenet is pretty much the embodiment of Murphy's Law. Now, a lot of people know that Murphy's Law is essentially saying anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's a law of nature. Another way of looking at it is basically no matter how many times you try to change or provide a different input, the end result is going to be the same. So this is essentially the idea that what you do, everything's going to happen the way it happens. So essentially, we as human beings are predestined to do something, but we don't really know what that is, so we're just going to go about our lives choosing different things, but we're still going to end up where we ended up. So the people in this film are essentially doing that, but they have the knowledge of it, so they basically have to play averages and try to get as close as they can to that specific set of data without messing much up. So as the film shows, the reversing entropy can have effects on the body, such as when humans do it, they have to breathe in carbon dioxide instead of oxygen. That's why they wear the gas masks. And in short, inverting entropy too many times can cause the universe to invert itself. The scientist who developed the technology then takes the 9 items known as the algorithm and flips them back in time to hide them. So as with most movies that have a scientist saying that you shouldn't do something, there are people who don't see those dangers. The difference in this film is that those people believe in another scientific theory that deals with time travel, and essentially saying that if they change something, they will create an alternative timeline. In the future, climate change has hurt them and is pushing these people to extinction. They believe that if they wipe out the reason for climate change, the humans of the present, their troubles will be fixed. These characters will plant items such as gold bars and instructions for Seder so he can prevent these issues from coming to pass and also stop his cancer. And this is where the grandfather paradox comes in, because if they were to stop humans beings, would their future even happen at all, which would then prevent them from sending those materials back in the first place, which would then cause climate change to happen anyway. So this is essentially the many worlds interpretation, aka the ideas that a lot of comic book lovers know as the multiverse. Which is, in short, if somebody changed the decision, how would the world change because of that decision? Like, for example, what if Hitler won World War II? Another interesting theory that this film deals with is the Janet Point interpretation, aka the reverse mirror universe. I'm not going into the full details of it because it's not so much what I think is going on in this film, but in short, it is the Big Bang created 2 mirror universes that see each other as opposites, similar to how we see both someone talking normally and talking in verse in this film. This idea also can be explored into organic chemistry when you look at chemical molecules. For those who don't know what it is or took it a really long time ago, you have chirality, which is essentially you have 2 chemically equivalent molecules that are only distinguishable between each other because they cannot be superimposed onto one another. They're essentially, when you try to look at your left and right hand, unless you turn one over, they can't be placed directly right on top of each other. Anyway, so the main point of this film is how it portrays the reversal of time concept within a real-life ancient 16th century artifact that is the Sator Square. So for those who don't know what this is, it is a word square containing a 5-word Latin palindrome. It is also known as the Rota Square, but it has been changed to the Sator over time. Pun intended. It is a 5x5 square made up of 5-letter words, thus consisting of 25 letters in total, all derived from 8 Latin letters, 5 consonant STRPN, and 3 vowels AEO. If read from top to bottom, left to right, it creates a palindrome: Sator, Repo, Tenet, Opera, Rotas, or Rotas, Opera, Tenet, Repo, Sator. But what do these words mean? So Sator is defined as essentially as a sower, planter. A Repo is most likely a common name. Tenet is basically to hold. Opera is kind of to work, operate. Rotas is more to turn or rotate. And the difference between a repo and the other ones is it's not a Latin word, but as David Sherlock says, who is an archaeologist who is an expert on this, it essentially has been wrestled into this meaning: the sower or repo holds effort the wheels. But because wheels don't really have to deal with sewing, it essentially is saying is that we're not much further forward than we are going backwards. So nothing really has changed from where you started, which goes back to the Murphy's Law that I talked about earlier. The exact translation of this is unknown, but the common interpretation is, he who sows the seeds has the key to the wheel of life. And I think that this phrase and the words that make up it is essential to understanding this film. I say this because Nolan has always tried to put a feeling or a concept into his movies. You can see this in Inception, The Prestige, Insomnia, etc. So to me, the Sador Square is this main idea that Nolan is putting into this film. Here's why. You have the obvious naming of this film, which is the center of the square. The opening of the film happens at an opera. Rotas turns up. See what I did there? As Sador's company, and also when they discover the time machine, and Sador is Bronosville's name. Arepo is the only thing that doesn't make so much sense to this, as the only indication that we get for this is the name of the painter who gives Kat the fake painting. But here's my interpretation of this. Arepo is the protagonist.
That part is a little dramatic.
Hear me out on this. We're never really given the true name of the protagonist. That's why I'm calling him the protagonist. All of the other characters have definite names, but he doesn't. At the end of the film, we learn that the protagonist is the one who forms Tenet and recruits all the people that he needs to carry out the events of the movie. He needs everything to happen exactly as he experienced, which unfortunately includes Sador having a hold over Kat and Max. When the protagonist first talks to Kat, she tells him that she became close with someone named Thomas Arepo, who would later use her to sell her a fake Goya painting to Sador for $9 million. This is what Sador uses leverage over Kat and why the events of the movie happen as they do. Kat even mentions here that Thomas Arepo is not someone you would meet face to face or even talk to over the phone, which explains why she wouldn't recognize our protagonist's face or voice as Arepo's. Then you may ask, why would he do that? Because this film kind of shows that he cares about her. So the answer to this is Neil. At the end of the movie, we are told that Neil was recruited by the protagonist.
So it's likely that the protagonist told Neil about his plans to sell Sador the painting that lets Sator take Kat and Max hostage. This is alluded to the first time that they meet each other in Mumbai. Neil asks the protagonist, would you take a child hostage? The protagonist says no, and then Neil asks a woman, he said, if I had to. I'm not looking to make much noise here.
When you watch this for the first time, you think that this is just trying to get into Sanjay's apartment, but I think knowing the ending really gives it a whole nother meaning, is that he's not trying to do a lot of noise at this specific point in time in the movie. So then another question is how does that make sense when he meets Michael Caine's character? Michael Caine essentially says to him that Arepo and Kat were too close for comfort, but then gives him the second Goya. If the protagonist was Arepo, how would he know this? So here's how I look at it. There are multiple versions of the protagonist in this movie, and they say that in the film. So I'm going to list these out as A, B, and C. So A is the one that hasn't saved the world yet, is naive, doesn't really know what's about to happen. And this is the one that we're kind of watching throughout the entire point of the film. So at the beginning of the film, he has him moving forward in time at the Opera House. At this point, he runs into the first part of the algorithm, but it's taken by Russian forces. Saved by someone moving backwards, and he sees the red string. He then joins the organization after he's found out that it was a test showing his dedication. He is then told the word Tenet. He then learns of the technology, tracks down Sador, and simply put, Sador is a very sadistic man. He only has a wife who is married to him because of their son, though only allows her to see him for a few minutes after school. This is different from how they started off at one point because they were happy. One day on their boat, she sees a woman jumping off, so she assumed that he was having an affair. They grew apart, and now Sador is blackmailing her so she doesn't run off. His wife then bargains a meeting with Sator with the protagonist if the latter can get rid of the paintings. He then tries to do this with Neil, which then brings him into contact with another person moving backward through time. They discover a time inversion machine in Sator's vault. The person then jumps back through and escapes, which ruins the mission. The protagonist then lies to Sator's wife and gets the meeting. Sator then gets the protagonist to steal plutonium, which is revealed to be another portion of the algorithm. Then Sator captures him and his wife, and after multiple time inversions happen on the mission, Sator then shoots his wife with a reverse bullet, which is something that is similar to the breathing that I described, an effect of an inversion of entropy. She cannot recover or be treated from this, as it is impossible to treat a wound that happened in the past, but then is not existent in the future with the forged painting that they bought together. When you would want to treat the wound. You know, after the woman, that the person who ruined the mission earlier was actually the protagonist moving backward in time. So this specific person, the one who is initially moving backward in time, is protagonist B. So this is how I kind of think about it. It's like Mario Kart. Yoshi is in lap 2, Toad is in lap 1. Yoshi then laps Toad before he can get to lap 2. Yoshi's on lap 3, now Toad is now going to be on lap 2. Protagonist B essentially lapped protagonist A, but in this film scenario, protagonist A is now becoming protagonist B, and the first protagonist B is moving on throughout the story. It is then revealed that Sador is moving backwards through time to where his wife were happy at the first point on the boat. The protagonist figures this out, and they put the future Kate there unbeknownst to Sador, and Sador waits for his past self to leave so he can think he can be with the past version of his wife. He then kills him, jumps off the boat, and the past version of herself sees the woman jumping off the boat, which sets us off the courses of the movie. At the same time, Sador's team is trying to set off the algorithm, and the protagonist and Neil eventually stop this. Was shot. This can only be fixed by a time inversion device, so this pushes our protagonist to move backward in time. We learn here the protagonist sees a Russian about to set off the algorithm. He then notices an apparently dead man with the same backpack from earlier with the red tag, and at the last second the soldier goes back in time, opens the door, the protagonist then gets the algorithm, and the other soldier are saved by Neil. They then agree to separate the algorithm between themselves. We learn then that the guy with the backpack tag is Neil. Neil then tells the protagonist that he actually recruited him, and they had a very good friendship for a very long time. Neil then proceeds to take the bullet for the protagonist in the past. This obviously leads to his death, as you can't recover from a bullet in reverse without a time inversion device. So the protagonist B then goes on to become protagonist C, which is the one that saved the world, knowing everything that's going to happen. This version then off-screen goes back in time before the Vietnam trip and the opera to recruit everyone, found Tenet, grows old, and then sells the painting to Sador. Protagonist C then gives another fake painting with as good as quality as the one he sold Sador to Michael Caine. This version of the protagonist tells Michael Caine what to tell protagonist A, who then eats it up and then does what his future self wants him to do. These details aren't really shown in the movie, and sure, yeah, you could say it's me filling in the blanks. However, I think that there's plenty of evidence in the movie that the protagonist is the one who's in control of everything, especially with how the film ends. And I go back to the commonplace translation of the Sator Square. He who sows the seeds has the key to the wheel of life.
Well, I've seen too much.
So that's what I think of the film's plot. It's complicated for sure, which in turn is one of the film's biggest flaws, as I said. And to fully enjoy this film, you have to be paying attention to each detail. At times, the explanation is very confusing, and there are a lot of times where the dialogue is hard to discern. Hilariously, face masks make people hard to understand. I found this funny, obviously, for the real-life allegory, but also this is the thing that was in debatably Nolan's worst film, The Dark Knight Rises, and then also Dunkirk. He may want to stay away from masks in the future. I think this complexity may turn some viewers off, but I do think that Nolan's prowess may bring people to the movie. However, it may have a similar effect that Blade Runner 2049 did a few years ago. I do think Nolan's strongest points in the majority of his films is the story, and this film does not really divert from that at all. It is perhaps Nolan's most ambitious film, and frankly, his imagination is amazing to say the least. And the more I think about it, the more I would put this in my top 3. Now, what did you think of the movie, and what did you think of my interpretation? Did it make it more confusing? And also, how does this film rank on your list of Nolan films? Let me know. Hit me up on social media. The former reviews on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And the URL is all the same. It's at the former review for each one. Feel free to check out backseatdirectors.com, where I work with a big team of writers working on reviews and also editorials and much, much more. Again, that's backseatdirectors.com. Please also subscribe to the podcast on your favorite service. It is on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and really, honestly, anywhere you can find podcasts. Also, I'm always wanting to grow and improve, so feel free to leave a review on your favorite service. I see the numbers, and I do this for you all, and I want to keep it entertaining. I really appreciate everyone supporting me by listening and talking about movies with me online. For those who have contributed financially, I really thank you for supporting me in that way. For those who want to financially contribute, please go to anchor.fm/the-formal-review and click support this podcast. And I thank you very much in advance, and any donation is appreciated. Thank you all for tuning in once again, and until next time, stay safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and I'll see you at the movies. Take care, everyone.
Thanks everyone for tuning into another episode of the Formal Review. Cheers and stay classy. We hope you'll join us again.